You are listening to the Push Media Podcast Network.
This is good shit.
I just narrowly avoided shitting myself while driving and operating my own motor vehicle because I just saw the scariest looking thing on the side of the road, and it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a horrific car crash. It wasn't a homeless person. It wasn't two homeless people. What it was, ladies and gentlemen, what I just saw completely on its own with no one supervising it was a fucking 3.5 foot tall turkey vulture hybrid of death strolling on the side of the road behind just moving vehicles. There's a street, there's some cars on the street driving because, and then next to the street, there was a sidewalk. And on that sidewalk was a bird that looks like it was from ancient Egypt to protect the pharaoh as he entered the next life. Fuck, I hate birds. I hate birds so much. And I used to when I say I hate birds, it's not something I take pride in. It's not something I say for attention. It's not something I say to frame myself as a victim. It's something I say with a great deal of shame, but also a bit of salesmanship, because you cannot like birds. And birds are probably the third most popular pet in America. Comparatively, to put it in an analogy to sports, because that's how most analogies work, to me at least. You know how there's 4 major sports in America? You have the NFL, the NBA, and then you got, hockey, which no one really cares about, and then there's baseball. Then there's NASCAR. NASCAR is like the most popular sport that's not a real sport. So in those terms, birds are like the most popular pet that are not a real pet. Birds are fucking dinosaurs of all shapes and forms that really look like the apex predator. From a blue jay to a Tyrannosaurus Rex, there is a goddamn link. That's just a fact of nature. So whenever I see a bird, they make me anxious, and it's embarrassing, but it's because I think at some point in time, this is the cousin of a predator that wiped out entire groups of cavemen by taking them with their talons up to the sky, never to be seen again. There is nothing safe or normal looking about a bird. All of your weird aunts that you don't really talk to that much who have a pet bird can fuck themselves because they're wrong. And what they're doing is inviting evil into their home by keeping a dragon imprisoned indoors. That's just, I'm trying to sound tough, but the fact of the matter is I nearly pooped myself because I saw a bird again. Albeit the bird was walking, which is a weird sentence. Oh, man. I'm glad I got that off my chest, though, because it was just a moment of panic. I nearly veered off the road like the end of that Eminem song with the lady in his trunk. But I didn't. Ooh. Well, Norm Macdonald's dead. That is really a shame. And I wanted to just say something because I came to Norm Macdonald late in life because, I'm a young person. I never watched Saturday Night Live, and I really initially only knew Norm Macdonald as the guy who was, a funny role in some Adam Sandler movie, like Billy Madison or just like the one of Adam Sandler's guys. It wasn't until a couple years ago when I watched the episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, which is where Jerry Seinfeld, while dressed like Ellen DeGeneres, will have comedians get in his novelty cars from 1940 Italy with wicker basket seats and just drive to some coffee shop in Manhattan and essentially disrupt the business for several hours while 2 billionaires can buy 2 $8 cups of coffee. But on the episode, Norm Macdonald was, the guest. And one of the funniest fucking anecdotes I've ever heard. It was really one of the funniest, quips. I laughed out loud to myself, which is something I really don't do often. I really don't laugh. Even if something's funny, if I'm by myself and I'm watching it, I just don't laugh out loud. I don't know why that is. I don't know what that is. But regardless, that's what it is. And what it shall be, inshallah. So I'm watching this episode, and it was right around the time of Dr. Cosby was going to jail because of, turns out no reason at all, legally speaking, because he's out the pen, as we all know. But the reason he was brought up was because Norm Macdonald was explaining how there was a story in which at some point he heard that comedian Patton Oswalt, from famous King of Queens Ratatouille fame, He's tweeted something about Dr. Cosby, and I'm not going to stop calling him Dr. Cosby because Temple University chose to bestow that title upon him, so live with your mistakes. So, Norm Macdonald's explaining how Patton Oswalt tweeted that the worst part, the absolute worst part of all of the news around Dr. Cosby was the fact that the hypocrisy of the whole situation, how a man who was known as America's father, a man who represented racial unity, traditional American values, family-oriented guy, always telling young kids to pull up their pants while telling young girls to pull them down, he was a hypocrite, and that was the most offensive and horrific thing to come out of the whole situation. So Norm Macdonald says this to Jerry Seinfeld and some cameras, and Jerry Seinfeld, kind of thoughtfully, takes a moment, and then he says back to Norm, well, what do you think the worst part was? And then Norm Macdonald goes, I thought the worst part was all the rapes, Jerry. The answer was right there all along. Obviously, the worst part of a rape trial is the rape. You fools. You Ratatouille Spence Olchin looking motherfuckers. We get so caught up in intellectualizing the meaning and abstracting these esoteric concepts and principles as we all construct this fucking tragic comedy in our head that really no one gives a shit about, when the answer is quite simple. The worst part of something bad that someone's in court for is the bad thing they did to somebody. It's very, very simple. Stop overthinking things, because when you overthink things, you become very susceptible to not seeing the most obvious shit. And in the same way that, hiding in plain sight is usually the best time to hide, or the best way to hide something, the best way to sneak something across to people, the best way to slip something by a person is in the most obvious way. Because the people who are at least kind of or remotely aware that they should have their guard up, they're so finely tuned into making sure nothing gets by them that they will discredit the large percentage portion of the pie that says the most basic thing is the way to do it, because they're so busy looking for the sneak attack, which is exactly what the fuck is going on with China again. And I'm sick of talking about China. I really, really am. I'm sick of it. I don't like bringing it up. I'm hopefully someone on a list of people who is considered an enemy of the state in the democratically elected land. I really don't like China, but I'm also sick of thinking about it and talking about it, because it seems like a pointless, endless cycle where both sides are symbiotically at war with one another, as oxymoronic as that whole phrase sounds. So I was talking about Australia last time because the Australians have seemingly lost their mind. They've gotten weird with how they're handling COVID. They went from 0 to 1 infection, so all of a sudden everyone was monitored, like that movie The Island with the guy who played, the second fiddle in the Star Wars prequels, Ewan McGregor or whatever. Yeah, anyway. So Australia was losing its mind. The government was doing things like having people have to text daddy government where they are within 15 minutes to make sure they're not infecting anybody with the flu virus that's been around the whole time. So that was when we last checked in on Australia. Since then, Australia has acquired a nuclear submarine, which is not an overrated Beatles song. Australia was gifted, I don't know how that works with receipts or military presents to one another around, holiday time. But the Australian government, more so the military, was gifted a nuclear submarine by us, by the United States, by these United States, to quote Donald Trump. So this nuclear submarine, which is something I didn't even know existed or how it would go about existing, because I like nuclear, and I'm not going to sit here and claim to be a physicist or a chemist or anyone who understands how bombs are built, made, or worked. And it seems like, just a quick side note, everyone who does is a self-indulgent little bitch. But anyway, we were given, one of our Navy vessels that's also a uranium bomb to the Australian government. And when we did something like that, who that upset? None other than China, because China's really in control of that whole part of the globe. The part of the globe that no one gives a shit about, the other side of it, way past Europe, which is about as far as our line of giving a shit about the people there goes. China really values Australia. They believe they should have Australia in the same way they believe they should have Taiwan. And if you need a little more clarification on the issue between China and Taiwan, I refer you to wrestler John Cena. But China values Australia because, it's a strategic point of land, kinda is a focal point for all global, ships and commerce and all that good stuff. And especially if China is going to play the role of manufacturer for most of the world, which that might even change as other countries develop, quote unquote, develop, and also just decide to have more slave labor factories. China might actually hit a point where their child slave labor employees might actually become like too costly. It might hit a point where China's slave labor kids, the breaker boys of Shanghai, might be considered too expensive. They might be considered the catering company that everyone loves, but no one can afford, so then we have to go with India instead. I could see that happening. It's perfectly plausible as the demand for newer and better cameras in your iPhones increase. But China really values Australia because of strategic reasons. So when us, as the United States, decide to give a uranium ship to Australia, China don't love that. What China does is says, hey, we don't love that. And also, we're going to, send some of our ships past Hawaii. Don't worry about it. You send a boat to Australia, we're going to send a boat to Hawaii. Tit for tat, nobody freak out. Meanwhile, this is exactly how world wars are started. Evidence for that being the first 1 and 2. Which is also funny because while it feels like there is an impending war with China, and I don't want to say an impending war with just China. I feel like there's the idea that there's an impending World War III is inevitable, I think, to most people thinking, because it just seems like the direction everything's headed. With countries' economies, the pandemic, tensions, the politicization of everything, the fact that there's, generally no certainty or stability in most of the key players of the world. Their governments are kind of up in the air right now. It seems like the only logical explanation or outcome from all of this would be another world war. That being said, the main battle within that world war, which may or may not happen, but probably will, really will stem or will be the two sides of America versus China, I think. I don't know. I'm no expert. I think that's what the whole point of me having a show is just pretending to be one. But China and the United States are the problem. But what's interesting is the fact that the two primary sides of this, incoming World War III, be that the United States and China, they also became the two global, leaders, powers, superpowers, the two main groups, essentially, when we think of all of, Earth. The way they became those two powers is through the economic need for one another, through the symbiosis of their willingness to have child slave labor kids build iPhones and our desire to buy those iPhones. We need those. It makes no sense because while they're clearly our biggest villain and all we do is exercise war games where we send like cooler, newer ships, some of which may or may not contain uranium, to different countries like Taiwan, Australia, all in the name of, protecting coveted, the seaport lines to get, ships from one place to another, while the ship getting from the one place to the other is the very reason China and the United States have enough money to be the two biggest dicks in the world to begin with. It's a weird posturing thing in my head because I can't wrap my head around what the actual motherfucking conflict is. Because it's very easy for me to understand how a dictator-ran communist country doesn't like the United States, how they want to be in charge, and how one guy in charge of this, once you have a dictator, dictators want to control the world. That's, again, history, duh. So I could easily understand the motivation for a country to want to take out this country. But what I don't understand is the fact that the evil dictator country in this situation only became so powerful because of how resourceful and bountiful and self-sufficient they are to an extent, because of the constant interactions and purchases and orders made from American companies like Amazon, Apple, all the things that you buy, very few of which you need or use, all of that comes from China. If you don't believe me, look at all of literally, and I mean this as literally as possible, the clothes on you right now are from China most likely, or Taiwan, which if you ask China is China, or John Cena. So to act like to see these war games, to see these articles which are all fearing an incoming World War III, which definitely will happen, still confuses me because the two main people in power, the only way they got into the power, taking China, for example, the only way they hit a point where they can even start to consider the idea of becoming one of two biggest global dicks to the first biggest global dick is because of the United States. And if at any point war is officially declared and we are 100% cut off from doing business with each other in any way whatsoever, and we're just fighting with each other, your whole economy is going to take a massive hit, one which I don't think would be enough for you to recover from to assume your goal of having the biggest global dick. I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Prove me wrong if you can. I would be interested to know how you would do it, and really who you are, and what the fuck your deal is if you think you can prove what I just said wrong, if you're that much of an expert on foreign policy in China. I'd like to meet you. We should be more strict for who we also think our experts are. Which is weird, because at my core, I'm definitely somebody who is not quick to take your word for it as a leading expert because of appearance or lab coats or stethoscopes or things like that. But it seems like we have dropped the bar so low for whose opinion or advice or input we value or think is useful or should be, put into your own life. That bar has become way too low because now we're letting Nicki Minaj talk about vaccines, and people are taking it very seriously. But what's weird and what's funny about this one is that what Nicki Minaj said isn't all that crazy. And don't get me wrong, she is an absolute awful, horrific piece of human shit. She is a morally reprehensibly vile, abhorrent bitch. And I say all that very slowly because her brother, I'm pretty sure, I think I'm confusing her brother with, the guy who played Elmo and was proven to be a pedophile. Nicki Minaj's brother is just proven to be a pedophile. Also, her current boyfriend, convicted rapist. So Nicki Minaj, considering all of that, she then tweets, a story about how a friend of her cousin, which right out of the gate is maybe one of the biggest red flag, identifiers for a bullshit story of all time. A friend of my cousin's. That's like when you're in middle school and you're like, a friend of my cousin works at a video game company. A friend of my cousin is a BMX rider. Something like truly nonsensically so childishly unprovable or unverifiable. Nicki Minaj tweets that a friend of her cousin got the COVID-19 vaccine, and what it did was swell their testicles to the size of elephant trunks, at which point an impending marriage was called off. Now, that is just, on its surface, hilarious. A hilarious ordering of words. Sounds like something clearly not true. There has been concerns about the vaccine. Probably more than there should have been. I think that's fair to say. But there's also been true legitimate concerns about it, like Johnson & Johnson recalling the first vaccine because people were getting blood clots, or younger people having enlarged hearts as a reaction to getting a vaccine now. Or, that was pretty much it. No one has ever heard the third story in which they got the vaccine and their testicles swelled to the size of grapefruits, which called off pending nuptials. That hasn't happened. You haven't heard that. It definitely didn't happen to a friend of a cousin of Nicki Minaj. But Nicki Minaj also tweeted during, the same day, some other shit, she's not vaccinated, but she's probably going to get vaccinated because she still wants to go on tour. She got to make money. She's not going to let actual values get in the way of opportunity, which kind of, in my mind at least, sweeps under the crazy thing about the swollen balls under the rug a tiny bit, because it's not that. It's a funny thing to say, and clearly it's so outlandish that if you follow it up with "you're not a crazy anti-vax person," it just kind of seems like something you could write off as maybe a joke, and no one needs to really press on it and get to the bottom of it, so just let it be. But that part was conveniently left out in all the headlines in which Nicki Minaj is now an anti-vaxxer. But interestingly enough, you notice none of those headlines or articles that you've been reading touch on the fact her brother is a convicted pedophile who she defended, and her ex-boyfriend is a convicted rapist. She's like the number one most selling female hip-hop artist, maybe just recording artist of the last 50 fucking years. And she's surrounding herself with rapists and pedophiles and people with swollen, impotent dicks. And the only swollen, impotent dick behavior that we should be concerned with is the behavior of China. Those impotent, anxious, they want to have a big global dick, but you don't, and you never will. And the best way for us to prevent that from happening probably is not to give uranium boats to Australia at a time when Australia is entering 1984, the novel, not the year. But also, we can't have a global war, right? If we need, these two countries need each other to be the two, people in charge to begin with. It's an interesting fucking dynamic. And it confuses me. Because I really feel like I'm generally doing a decent enough job at following it. And I feel like I'm not stupid enough to be incapable of understanding why it's happening. And yet, here I sit, making it legit, and when my pen hits the paper, oh shit. But yet, here I sit completely confused as to why we keep puffing out our chests with one another globally and making everyone concerned, making all of the citizens in these countries worried about a global nuclear holocaust, when they're just worried about getting some sleep before they can either go to their jobs, which they will then get money so they could buy the new iPhone, or people could worry, they're worried to get some sleep so they could get up and go to their jobs in the factories to go make those iPhones. So how about everybody cool it? Cool it down. Now, just to add that in with the other musical reference. Oh, I went through like a 3-week period where I was really into New Edition recently. I don't know what that says about me as a person, but that's up to you now, I guess, to decide. So, watch out. Man, it's getting weird. You know what else is getting weird? The Met Gala. And the fact that we had what's her name? Alexia? No, that's like Amazon's robot. AOC. What's AOC's first name? Alison? Whatever, it doesn't matter. All right, we'll just go with AOC. So AOC, she went to the Met Gala, right? And the Met Gala, if you're, someone who knows about culture, the Met Gala is like a Halloween party for rich or influential people to go act like rich or influential people straight out of a fucking Eyes Wide Shut scene where they dress up in their finest thousands of dollar attire to look like they're going to go sacrifice something to a giant wooden owl statue and then have a dinner of like hopefully baby birds or something. At least they could, at the very least you could do that. You could eat some fowl, some hooved, cloved fowls or something just weird. Anyway, so the Met Gala occurred and AOC gets invited. Now AOC, being pretty much just me, being like someone in her 20s who knows that the Met Gala is kind of cool. You know that rappers go there and shit. You know Kanye goes there. You know Jason Derulo falls down the steps. It's just something that seems like a cool socialite type thing to go to. But the problem is when your whole shit is about rich people being evil and wrong for being rich, you can't go to a party which celebrates that. It becomes challenging. It becomes a bit of what PR professionals call a bad look. So in order for her to work her way around that, She agrees to go, but then first leads off with a message saying, hey, by the way, I think rich people should be taxed and all that good stuff. But I'm going to the Met Gala and I'm going to go be brave in their face. So she goes and she wears a dress, which is, very thought-provoking, in which she looks like, a fucking large cup of lemonade from Chick-fil-A, which on the back of the dress says, tax the rich. And the way the Met Gala works, the celebrities who go are all dressed or all outfitted by the most, important or current designers in fashion. So AOC, she wore an Anya Wintour dress, which looked like it belonged, to a Chick-fil-A mascot. And real quickly, the only reason I know who Anya Wintour is, the chief designer for Vogue, I only know who Anya Wintour is because of Kanye West lyrics. I only have maybe 2 shirts that are more than just a plain color. Kanye West is the only reason I know anything about some of these names that pop up in fashion stores. And while we're on the topic, Donda was significantly better than Certified Lover Boy, and Donda was still a piece of shit. So that's just settled once and for all. But back to the story. So AOC goes to the famous rich person dinner as a famous rich person, wearing a dress that says we should fuck with famous and rich people, and everyone lauds her as a hero. When you are missing the fact that she is just now and happy to be and cheery because it's her first time invited to the party, which makes it official, another rich and famous person. You see what I'm saying? With people getting so caught up in making sure nothing's getting snuck by them, that the most obvious shit is getting slipped by you. In this case, the person who is literally an elected official, not someone who does work like make pretend or music, someone who is in Congress and shit, was going to the party which celebrates and hails everything she was put in office campaigning on, she was going to put an end to. And it snuck by everyone because there was a kind of amusing Instagram post with her fat tits and a dress that looked like a Chick-fil-A cup, poking fun at it maybe. Be a little more discerning. Be a little more unwilling to accept on face value. Just take a second, actually. Take all that back. I don't even need you to be discerning. I just need you to take a fucking second before you decide anything, make a thought, or have an impulse. Just take a moment. Just take a moment. Take a breath. Think about what you're looking at. Goodness gracious. Also, the United States is broke, which is concerning. It's very concerning because how are we going to pay China to keep making iPhones? But in a memo from the White House, we are fucked. We're real fucked. And everyone thought we weren't fucked or kind of nervously surprised we weren't fucked because, unemployment was going on, which just ended. And during unemployment, there was people like myself who didn't have a job at that point in time who were making more money on unemployment than they had while having a job, which is outlandish. Clearly will not end well. That's how you end up needing 47 million Prussian francs to buy a loaf of bread in a wheelbarrow inside of a political cartoon. But the United States is eerily approaching that point in time. And in this memo, the White House said that we are on course for a very quick recession, a fast-moving recession. A recession in which people are going to be concerned because, unlike the recession in 2008, which was caused by bankers and banks taking advantage of people, which is just a tolerable evil I've come to accept if there are to be banks and people, this financial crisis will be because everyone has fucked their personal finances or their personal finances have been ingested with fake funny money via stimulus, via bloated unemployment benefits, and it has propped up artificially parts of the economy which make no sense and therefore is going to have a ripple effect when it comes time during the course of the year where everyone can kind of expect a certain amount of money to flow from within parts of the economy. An example would be retail around Christmas. When that is fucked with, when that is altered, the repercussions of which are something that maybe 5 people understand, and the rest of us either can't understand what those 5 people are saying, or don't give a shit because we're in line for a PlayStation 5. And when the citizens' money is fucked, it gets scary. Because the government, whether you know it or not, relies on the citizens to buy shit. which is why when coronavirus happened and everyone was concerned, we were given stimulus money so we could go out and buy things and spend things. And the only reason that happens is because the act of buying something or consuming something, there are countless jobs attached to that process you don't even think about. So if you go to fucking, let's pick a weird store, Pier 1 Imports, and you're looking at a lamp, that lamp was made by a person who had a job. That lamp was packaged by a person who had a job. That lamp was shipped to a different place by a person who had a different job. That package was received by a person who had a different job. That package was driven to Pier 1 Imports by a person that had a different job. And then the person at Pier 1 Imports murdered the person who drove that to Pier 1 Imports and then married his wife and named their children after him. So there are, and then there's the person who works at Pier 1 Imports who's just a salesperson trying to move lamps and shit. So there is an entire ecosystem attached to the simple transaction of buying something in any country, irregardless of where you are. So when that's fucked with, when that's altered, there are, in this instance at least, 5 hypothetical people in different countries whose jobs have now been affected, from factory worker to truck driver to everyone in between. So it seems like an awfully funny time to be swinging dicks with China, threatening to start a World War III, when our relationship and our mutual existence, or probably not mutual, more so for China, is dependent on everyone in, the United States having money and wanting to buy shit. But when the United States says, we're starting to run out of money, this is starting to look kind of bad here, what are we going to do? I would like to point out to everybody that the quickest way for any country, and this has been proven throughout history, in every millennia, you probably remember this from high school if you took any history class and listened a little bit at all, the number one way for a country to propel its economy and inject cash and create jobs and create production and lead manufacturing, the only way to do that is to start a war.